Good afternoon, everybody. So perhaps I could start with letting everybody just introduce themselves briefly.
Yep, good afternoon. I'm Mike Lloyd. I'm with Globalinternet. We provide internet connectivity anywhere on the planet, the underlay for the SD-WAN.
And I'm Bryce Jewell. I'm the UK and US MD for the enterprise team at Global Cloud Exchange. I'm an Aussie, and no, I haven't forgiven you for this weekend.
Hi, I'm Lionel Ho from Singapore Telecoms. So Singapore Telecoms is a global service provider specializing in the Asia Pacific. About 5 years ago, we acquired TrustWave Security, so we find ourselves in providing a lot of security solutions as well to our customers.
Great. Okay. Well, we got the graveyard slot, so you're probably all sleepy after lunch. So we'll try and keep this lively, and I'll try and keep my eye out for questions from the floor. So please don't be backwards in coming forwards. And if I miss it, I apologise, but I will try to keep an eye on things. So, guys, let's start with a nice, easy question: is one-stop shopping dead?
Is it dead? No, of course it's not dead. But are there other options? Of course there are as well. So. The landscape has clearly changed. SD-WAN changes the nature of the solution, which means that from enterprises, service providers need to explore and see the best option they can get either for their own business or for their customers. So our point of view is that we are experts in sourcing internet of any type, anywhere on the planet. Work with the likes of us, you will get the best of breed connectivity for your, you'll get the best of breed underlay for your overlay. You won't get that if you go one-stop shop. So our point of view is that it's not dead, but we would encourage exploring options so that you can identify the best of breed solution that's going to meet your needs rather than a more generic need.
Okay. And Bryce, got any view on that?
Just to rebut a little bit.
Of course.
No, I don't think it is dead. A lot of our customers tell us, look, we can't do it in-house better. We need someone that really understands our business, and we simply don't have the resource internally. We heard this earlier today from Divya at Philips. He identified a partner that had the scale. They weren't going to lose the agility, and they had the ability to they have the skill set internally to actually manage their problem. What we see with our customers is really going back to that vendor management piece, is having the ability to actually manage 700 suppliers globally under a single service wrap is quite a challenge when you move to a do-it-yourself model. Do you have the feet on the street? Do you have the local language skills? Do you understand the regulatory environment in places like China? And these are aspects that a one-stop shop can help solve.
Okay.
I echo my fellow speakers here. Certainly, it's not dead. There isn't a silver bullet or a one-stop shop or a one size that fits all in this particular topic. Once again, it all depends on the resources you have as an organization, and if you have enough IT resources to manage multiple vendors, right? So we still see out there where there are many large organizations who have extremely limited resources in the IT department. Certainly, a one-stop shop would be the best solution that way going forward. Now, however, if you're an organization who's looking for fast deployment, for rapid fault resolutions, then I think it's important to look at the specialists, right? A lot of our customers come to us because a lot of providers who have their arms around everything, right? They kind of lack a bit of focus sometimes, and we see circuit deliveries they have issues with circuit deliveries. It can take up to about 5 to 6 months in some cases, and with customers coming to us to say, look, we need it in 2 months, can you do it? The answer is yeah. Most of the time we get circuits delivered within 2 months or so. So I think there are advantages coming to a regional specialist now. In the case of SD-WAN deployment, right, I think, yeah, once again, go to a reputable global service provider, right, which has a global look because we certainly need you will certainly need the global management on the perspective of SD-WAN.
So picking up on that point then, so obviously early entrants into rolling out SD-WAN generally in enterprise have been DIYers. And you've obviously got the telecoms company coming along with their total bundle service. Is there a middle way emerging, do you think, where the overlay is sourced separately from the underlay?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think we certainly see that as an emerging trend as well, right? So we have a lot of customers coming to us, doing it themselves, sourcing it. We definitely see that. And at the end of the day, it is a balance, right? It is a balance of your sourcing resource, right? But from our experience, we see that, hey, look, it's important for you to get a very strong foundation with your network because that's really the key to good data, right? And once you have that overlay, yes, certainly you can manage it yourself as well. So yeah.
Okay, so if you fast forward into a world where perhaps people are looking at perhaps regional or certainly multiple underlay providers, what are the pros and cons of that versus a global approach? And if you have multiple providers in, how do you address some of the issues like SLA management, end-to-end performance? Perhaps you can tell us about the pros and cons from your perspective.
I mean, one of the things with the evolution into SD-WAN and internet as a key part of the solution is we're seeing many enterprises are going and sourcing independently from their one-stop shop contracts anyway. So almost to a degree, this is happening irrespective of, across the market. So and I understand some of the tensions, some of the issues that arise with splitting the sourcing. And the SLAs and SLGs is a really interesting area because one of the things that we're experts on is seeing exactly what is actually genuinely out there at a really detailed level, and we make that visible to our customers, to our service provider and carrier customers. And so we can actually help people understand genuinely what is available in the underlay from an SLA, from a performance perspective, in a particular country, region, city even. And we can help people make good choices from that. And it's, so we deliberately don't offer a generic kind of commercial SLA. We give that transparency. So I think one of I'm arguing that it's a benefit actually to go more specialist because you get to see you can see the insight, you get to see what's actually available there. And what's available and what's possible in an internet landscape is vastly more complex than from an Ethernet or an MPLS kind of landscape. And the puts and takes that you need or you can make on commercially versus performance. So do you want a break fix same day or next day or best efforts? And some of the decisions you can make on that can massively affect the commercials of the service. So we help people understand that, and that's the sort of. So whilst it might sound superficially that actually having a single point for an SLA can be advantageous, actually having an expert understanding what is actually out there and how the services are actually going to perform for your business has real value.
A single SLA might be the lowest common denominator.
Precisely.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, an SLA is part of it, right? But it's when you go out to a multi-vendor approach, is how do these services actually integrate with each other? Putting everything over the internet is great. You can save a lot of cost. We've talked a little bit about latency, but it's only part of the question. It's how do we get the traffic back to where our core data is sitting? If it's here in the UK and you've got a site in Oz, and you're at the mercy of the internet, and you're looking at your SD-WAN platform, and you're seeing the latency spike, but you've got no one you can actually pick up the phone to and say, why is this happening? Because you might have two different providers that are peering God knows where in the States. Whereas what we do is try and take a slightly different approach. So going back to the original question, I think you have to provide that type of service to customers. There is certainly some of ours that have gone down a in-house managed SD-WAN platform, but they identify the fact that managing the underlay is hugely complex. and it will have a detrimental effect on the gains that they get from the SD-WAN platform. So they come to guys like us that have 30-odd years of experience managing very complex global solutions. And in certain countries, internet just doesn't work. You need to have a repertoire of multiple different technologies, but understand how to piece it all together and then provide that under a single service wrap. So it's a little bit more than just an SLA. Because quite frankly, that $50 you get back isn't going to help you when your manufacturing plant goes down.
Yeah. I mean, in reality, SLA is different from countries to countries and cities to cities because, to fix a circuit, even though it's in a city, if you're in the Philippines, right, it takes the guy a lot longer to get to his destination. Whereas somewhere else will be a lot quicker. So even within the city, you have different SLAs, right? So now, how do you then manage? Back to the point, how do you then manage these different SLAs? I think automation and e-bonding, that is critical in how you should be managing these SLAs, right? And that's where a single pane of glass is very important as well. And certainly, I think it's important for you to ask your providers, for this automation. And with that, right, rebates, should the performance deteriorate, should also be automatic back to you, should be credited automatically back to you.
So it's interesting. The internet is variable. Agreed. There are things that you can do or we can do that can almost eliminate that variability. And so partnering with some middle mile providers, some specialist solution providers that we can bring to the party that actually would provide a level of assurance and surety of service that is will absolutely assure customer applications will work. So I think that's a good example actually of where specialism, and I completely agree, any enterprise that wants to go out and source in 30, 40 different countries and speak to maybe 300 or 400 different ISPs is going to find a tough challenge. Mm-hmm. However, specialism in the sourcing of the underlay, the overlay, the security wrap, the UC solution, whatever, I think brings significant benefits because the landscape is changing rapidly, and being at the kind of the cutting edge of what is capable and making an SD-WAN work to its full optimum capability needs that level of specialism.
So might you say go to a specialist that understands the market? You, Bryce, was saying, well, the internet's not the same everywhere. Emerging markets, some countries perhaps that isn't the ideal vehicle. You've got regulatory restrictions like China, for instance.
Absolutely.
So how do you navigate? How does an enterprise navigate through that? In the olden days, they'd have put out an RFI and an RFP, and how would they do it today?
It's about really trying to figure out what the technical requirements are. What are you trying to achieve as a business first and foremost, and then building a procurement process around that to go out to market. The one thing that I'd say just as a sidestep is I think a lot of credence is put into the top right quadrant, focusing on the big guys. Go to your usual suspects. You don't get fined for choosing IBM, for example. And there's a lot of really niche players out there that deliver a great service, right? And they spend much more time understanding your business, not just trying to sell technical stuff and waves, etc., but really figuring out how the network is impacting your business today and where you're trying to take the business to. And they try a lot harder. So you're a very big fish in a small pond. So I think it's worth, not just looking at the usual global service providers. It's focusing on going to guys like ourselves, as an example, that we specialize in networks. This is what we do. We've been delivering hybrid WAN services for 20 years, so it's not new to us. We have that pedigree of integration expertise that I think is really needed, whether or not we're managing the SD-WAN or we're just doing the underlay piece. So it's really speaking to the market and not being sort of bamboozled by all the glitzy glamour.
Yeah, all the hype. Yes, yeah. And a couple of questions here around around internet performance and how you might contract for that. You know, I've worked with a client who looked very carefully at the peering points, looked at latency to the on-ramps for Office 365. You know, not every customer might go to that level, but how does an enterprise try and minimise, if you like, the risk of using internet?
So
how do they contract for that?
So I've got 10,000 odd endpoints around the world. I deal with 1,200 ISPs. I've got performance data of the internet in all of those points. I've got performance data at an ISP level. How good are they at responding to service incidents? You know, do they meet their SLAs? I've got data on latency, packet loss. I can identify at the point that a customer is selecting or designing a solution what's likely to be a good or appropriate solution for them. And if we see there are likely to be performance issues, there are overlay mechanisms that I can deploy that would mitigate or largely remove those problems. So engaging with a specialist and actually understands at a detailed level what works, where, and how can really be really value additive to the solution design.
What about, I'll let you answer that one, Bryce, perhaps also add in, when you're sourcing, that's one thing, and then you've got to run the network afterwards, so what you do about it on an ongoing basis.
I mean, everything we do for our customers is really tailor-made to them. So we're not a off-the-shelf product type company. Sure, if you're buying waves across the Atlantic, etc., yeah, that's a very much off-the-shelf product. But when we talk about our managed network services solutions, they are really tailor-made to what the customer needs now and what they're trying to achieve in the future. So when we're building a hybrid WAN solution for customers, and we've done this for many years, we try and get the gateways, the concentrators, as close to those customers as possible to mitigate some of the effects of the internet, as it were. And when we're building, whether it's an SD-WAN overlay, etc., we have the same sort of ethos. So it's about trying to get the users as close as possible to those endpoints, reducing latency and getting them onto our core backbone, which is one of the largest in the world. And then getting that through to their data. I'd say this: MPLS isn't dead. Ethernet is there. We deliver a lot of wave capacity to various companies out there. MPLS still is going to play a pivotal role, in my view, for the next few years, and I don't see it going away completely. There's certain countries where, yes, you can deliver. China as an example. You can deliver VPNs into China. It will probably go down at some point. It did go down in October 2017. And it's having the ability to actually augment that and find what the right technology is in a given jurisdiction. And that's something that's happening in Russia as well. We've seen most recently in Egypt some changes there. And I think we're going to start seeing more and more of that. And it's going to have an effect on our ability to make use of internet in certain countries.
Yeah. Arnold, you got anything you want to add to that?
Yeah. And to your point, I think the internet is the internet. So today you might go from AN to BN in 4 hops. Tomorrow it might be 20 hops, right? So how do you control this? I think these days a lot of vendors out there are providing what we call a middleware solution, right? So where you have from your AN BN you have a single hop into this middle mile, right? And within this middle mile, it will give you performance guarantees, your jitter, your latency, your packet loss, right? All of the above. So make use of this middle mile technology, right? And these middle miles actually have gateways out of China as well. So yeah, it will help you circumnavigate the Great China Firewall. It's all done above board, of course. And this cloud will also take you to the nearest SaaS servers and SaaS gateways. So do look out for these technologies.
So I realise I'm probably the only one of the team that are on the enterprise side, but so I'll ask you to put an enterprise. Imagine you've got an enterprise hat on for the moment. So you in the old world you had possibly agreed a single contract for your managed service, you manage routers wrapped around MPLS, perhaps a bit of VPN in there. So now you fast forward again, you're looking at possibly overlay and underlay separated, potentially multiple underlay providers. The operations man is looking a little bit pale at this point because he's thinking, how's that all going to work? The procurement guy's looking very, very worried at this point because he realises he's got a shed load of work to do. what should an enterprise be looking to do in that, and what are the things what are the smart enterprises doing with you guys to make that the best outcome possible for them?
I think so. What we see a lot of is we are getting a lot of RFPs these days where we see a very big breakdown of lots. So RFPs are split up by regional locations, sometimes to a point where they are split up to a specific country. The entire property, network property is actually put on RFP, including your LAN, including your edge devices. And as providers, we are asked to quote for all of them. So what we see a lot is once obviously the enterprise gets back this information, they will be able then to look at the best solution, taking pieces from all the bidders, right? Obviously, there's going to be lots of permutations on the table, but it gives the enterprise a lot of solutions then. As an example, right, you might have vendor A providing your backbone, but this vendor B might also be providing for a larger region. Then from there, it does make sense because you can then utilize, you have one less gateway to design for then. So once again, you have lots of permutations that way, and it's certainly an advantage for an enterprise. But with this large number of permutations, I think we typically work with a network consultant, and we see a lot of enterprises making the network consultants put the permutations together to give them a best match.
So a jolly good thing that is too.
We see for a lot.
Right, sorry.
Yeah, the challenge really is how do you actually approach this? How do you find out who's the right suspect to go to in the first place? And yes, we see a lot of RFPs come through from network consultants. We have a lot of existing customers that go through these processes from time to time as well. But for us, it's about maintaining that focus on what we do well, and that's really around the network piece. We don't try and go up the stack and start delivering services that we're not good at. We specialize, very similar to what you were saying before, we specialize in the network aspect, so integration expertise. And my personal opinion is we do that very well, and we'll continue focusing there.
Yeah. So in reality, the majority of business we do is either with service providers or carriers. The enterprise business we do direct is with enterprises who've invested in their own set of specific skills and experiences, and have the capability to make those choices, and have made a strategic decision that they're going to make those choices. As I say, most of what we do is with a service provider type model, and the key there is alluding to some of the issues you were highlighting earlier, is that actually you need your collaboration of service providers to work together seamlessly for you. So we've invested a lot in APIs and process standardization, so that actually when we work together with an SD-WAN service provider, a security service provider, we can operate as a single seamless function to the customer, and avoiding manual handoffs, avoiding any slip-ups or gaps between us.
Yeah, so integrated rather than islands of expertise. Yeah. Okay. We haven't really talked about security very much and sourcing of security. So again, are enterprises keeping that separate? Are they lobbing it in? Obviously, you need security at the edge of some form or other. But so how is that market emerging from your experience?
From my experience, I have no experience, so we don't get
that's
involved
easy.
in that, so that's easy.
Yes, okay.
I think it depends on the vendor they're going for. If we're talking about SD-WAN, we have some customers that are integrating the security appliance into the SD-WAN platform because there's a next generation firewall that's available. We have others that have gone down another route where, yes, there's a stateful firewall available, but there's other functionality that they need to have in a separate device. And the security architecture and risk is so great that they want to have a two-step approach. I think there's some efficiency gains with SD-WAN that enable us to put everything under a single box. It doesn't even have to be from the same provider. So we have a white box that we use internally. I know some others do as well. where you can service chain different VPCs to deliver the functionality that you want. But again, it really comes down to what the customer's trying to achieve, whether it's a cost thing they're going after, if it's getting rid of all of the devices that they have or the multiple vendors that they might have touching equipment on site. But yeah, there's some I think we've now come, after 15 years of Cisco promising, we've now finally got a situation where we can actually deliver these services to customers.
Yeah, I mean, like Brian, I think it's the key word here is fit for purpose, right? We have SD-WAN boxes are not entirely designed for security. They do have basic security components in there, but they are very basic. We all know that now. Will it work? Yes, it will, depending on your needs, right? So as an example, we have a retail customer who really needed to provide public internet Wi-Fi to their customers, and they only needed to blacklist certain URLs. That's good enough, right? Just make use of what's out of the box. But for a typical corporate network, for a corporate solution carrying corporate traffic, you might want to look at something a little bit more comprehensive. Now, heading to the cloud is not a bad idea these days, right? With all this, with SaaS services and the evolution of SaaS, actually looking at a cloud-based solution might actually be advantageous, right? A lot of these cloud-based security services actually have optimized routes to your SaaS clouds. So that's certainly something you can take advantage of as well. But certainly if you're forced to go, or if you have a preference to have an on-premise device, my recommendation is certainly to take on a white box solution, right? Where you can always offload or onload a different vendor's image or a different solution, and you can keep it updated all the time then.
You touched on content delivery and cloud there. It came up this morning about the need to be able to be dynamic, because commercial and business requirements change and you need network to adapt. So again, how does a customer make sure that they have that dynamic capability in how they've sourced their network?
That's a good point, Richard. So I think similar projects we work on as well. I think being dynamic is one of the key words these days, right? And a lot of times dynamic is also cost impacting, right? I think one example I can think of here is through a phase of migration or swapping vendors, right? I think it's you have the overlapping costs, right? You are paying your existing carrier, and you are also looking to implement the new network with your new provider. So where does this cost go, or how do you optimize this cost here? I think it's important to look at bandwidth on demand, burstable bandwidth, right? So give you an example, right? You can set up, obviously there are peering points, right? So from your new vendor, take on a smaller bandwidth first, right? As you build up your bandwidth, or as you build up the sites on your new network, then scale up that bandwidth in the interconnection site, right? So this would certainly give you some cost flexibility there, right? That's with the cost aspects. But certainly you want to look at also, having a flexible, really just flexibility, right, around the solutions you are being offered, and be able to scale from there.
Yeah, perhaps some Bryce can pick up on that one. And I'm thinking particularly, again, working with my customers, is traditionally it's been quite difficult it's always easy to upgrade capacity, not so easy to downgrade or to shift from one product to another. For instance, possibly seeing a net shift from MPLS to DIA over time. So how does an enterprise make sure it's in good shape to be able to do that?
Well, and this is one of the things that SD-WAN enables us to do. I think we look at SD-WAN a lot and talk about cost, and it's really one of the main drivers that everyone sort of talks about is cost, and we can move to the internet. But part of it's also because the applications have moved from an on-prem situation to a SaaS environment, which sits in the cloud. So it's really, from my point, is it's more of offloaded that traffic. Traditionally, that would have been tromboned back into a data center, and that's where you had your security policy, and everyone was happy because that was the only place it could come in and out of the network. But now we've got our email, video, everything sitting in the cloud. Even we have, security proxy services that we are delivering in the cloud as well. So it doesn't make any sense to actually trombone those back. So the SD-WAN or hybrid WAN sort of enables us to make use of some of those services that historically were sitting there idle. Which with us they weren't, by the way, but yeah, they're active. It frees up and gives you some flexibility to give you surety. It pulls some of the dirty traffic off the network and actually gets it out to the internet as soon as possible. That gives you some flexibility where in the past you would simply go to your provider and say, I need some more bandwidth, and they'd tell you it's going to take you 3 months and we might have to dig a new fiber in or something like this. Whereas now we can get some very large internet bandwidths in there, which again does sort of have an impact on cost. But it's not the only reason why we're going down that path. It's the shift of data from here to the cloud.
But do you think, and maybe you can answer this one as we go, do you think enterprises are looking for more flexibility in their contracting than perhaps has been available or in the marketplace before to allow them to shift their capacity around?
To a degree, yes. I think there's possibly a little bit overhype in terms of flexible. I think there's absolutely a need for flexible bandwidth for things like the data center or cloud interconnections. Your average typical branch site, the surety of knowing what you're going to get billed each month and that what you're getting is enough to support the applications there is in my experience at least. Not driving towards a kind of a flexible bandwidth or a flexible internet solution. They are available. We can provide them. We're considering whether we should even API to enable a kind of an online kind of change from it. Other dimensions of flexibility. We can deploy 4G services. So you've either got a delay on a wireline service delay, or you need to pop up an instance somewhere, or you've got some other you've got a conference and you've got a bunch of people. We can deploy temporary mobile solutions that can be posted out and just make your WAN appear wherever you happen to be for whatever reason.
I think there's no good points, interesting solutions like flexible bandwidth on demand. We've heard about that for a lot of years. I think it's becoming real, but finally. But I was thinking more on the contractual side. It can be an inhibitor to a client because he's locked into a certain capacity in MPLS on his contract and wants to use more DIA. He's just moved to Office 365 and suddenly there's a net move of traffic to the internet and suddenly they can't react.
Yeah, so for us it's a little bit of an advantage. So we own and operate one of the largest subsea systems in the world, but we have little to no terrestrial network globally. So we work with several hundred providers around the world, which gives us the ability to be flexible in who we actually use and the technology that we deploy. And it also gives our customers some flexibility as well through the life cycle of the contract for us to look at the solution they have today and figure out where they're going to go to tomorrow. So they might have started day one in an MPLS world, but day 365 could be moving to the internet or something else if 5G is around the corner, or something 6G or whatever. So we've always sort of offered that flexibility to our customers. It's part of that vendor agnostic approach that we've had, and flexibility really is at the core of everything we do.
Okay, cool. And just turning to again that multi-vendor underlay, how the knotty question of diversity. If you have a site that you need high availability, how do you best assure yourself going sourcing from the market that you're going to get the diversity that you require? What levels of diversity might you consider and how best do you contract for it?
It's always a detailed question. To get to the right answer for that requires legwork, requires if you've got a multi-vendor solution, it requires collaboration between the vendors. It depends on whether you're looking for fiber level separacy of of duct or entry point into the building, or whether you're looking for separacy of, in the broadband level, you might want, say, a passive optical network delivery and an ADSL delivery and a VDSL delivery and a 4G delivery. There's lots of interesting ways to overlay diversity now, in addition to the traditional fiber type level of diversity. But if you're talking about how do I absolutely assure that my fibers are routed and entered into my premises separately, then that's a detailed conversation, and there's no way around that. And simply specifying two different service providers doesn't provide any guarantee of that at all.
So some people would say the only way you can truly make sure it's secured is to contract to the one provider for both.
I'd agree. There's a large bank that went out a few years ago and contracted with two different parties. They were supposed to collaborate and deliver a diverse service, and then it went down. And then it turned out that supplier A had bought from supplier B, and they're on the same network. I think my personal opinion is that the only way you can really get some surety of that is go to a single service provider that is actually managing the last mile provider. If we're looking at it from a site perspective, that can provide some guarantees of that diversity. It's what we do for a lot of large banks and financial services customers, that we'll go to multiple providers, but they will ultimately, when they come to us, we are one of the connections going into the building, but we have to make sure it's completely diverse from a building entry standpoint and all the way back to the data center where they're accessing the data. And similarly on the managed service side, there's a whole multitude of different technologies out there, but it's very difficult to understand whether or not they're going in the same ducting or if they're going back to the same POP. You get some form of resiliency if you're going for different technologies, and you'll get some form of resiliency potentially if you're going to two different providers, but you're kind of putting your finger up in the air and hoping for the best.
It depends what kind of high availability you need, doesn't it?
And it really comes down to cost too.
Yeah,
that's the other
cost.
point,
Yeah,
right? It doesn't matter if you've got a shed load of cash, and if that site goes down, if you're a bank, and it's going to cost you $100 million a minute every time it's down, you're going to put a lot of cash into that. One of our packaging customers delivers billions of cans a year internationally, and they were saying recently if they lose their ERP connection, which is now sitting in the cloud, 11 of their sites have to be shut down in 45 minutes if they lose that connection, because they simply don't have the ability to store stuff in the warehouse and track it. So for them, having a completely resilient network and they understand the cost of the business is so great that they've invested into a very resilient network. But we manage that on their behalf.
This topic keeps my team and myself busy most of the time. And in Singtel, we actually pride ourselves to deliver a full diversity with high availability for our customers requiring high availability at their sites, right? So for us, using a single last mile carrier is absolutely key. Okay, there are ways around it if we haven't got a choice, but otherwise, as a go-to, it will always be using a single carrier. Now, and what are the reasons for this, right? Now, even if we are to go to, if you decide to do it yourselves or to go different carriers, if you're ever to procure a single link from one carrier, they will never ever give you a street level diagram. They will probably not tell you which duct, which fiber, which node your fiber is coming in from. That will probably never happen, right? So we find that it's very important then, right, to get it from a single carrier. And what we do in Singtel is we actually have it under contract that these links needs to be diverse, right? And from there we scrutinize obviously the street level diagrams as well. Now on design is good, but another thing we really need to look at as well is in life. Because not a lot of people realize this, but from the point you first built your fiber from point A to point B, 3 years down the road, it would probably have changed paths maybe 2 or 3 times without you knowing it, right? Because in the world of telco and last miles, things do get redirected, right? So this is something that's very important as well. So in-life management of this last mile is also really critical. Okay.
I'm going to ask one last question, quick round, if that's okay, guys. We spent a long time on the underlay, and of course we didn't get to quite all the questions. But on the overlay, how would you source the overlay today? You know, we may have multiple underlays. Should it be one overlay, regional? How does an enterprise navigate what it should do in that space?
I was in the SD-WAN discussions yesterday as well. I think it's clear. Always a single global provider, right? And in my view, I think it's important to go to a provider that can manage, that can operate in tricky regions as well. China as an example. Where do you have the diversity in your orchestrator? Are you able to have gateways out of difficult countries, as an example? So yeah, always a GSP for that one.
Bryce, anything to add to that?
I think it's actually looking at people that've got experience. Again, on the SD-WAN side, we've taken a fairly vendor-agnostic approach, similar to what we do on the last mile, and that's really, we can't just support one particular solution because what supplier A wants is different from supplier B. So it's really looking at a managed service provider or a global service provider, whatever you want to call them, that's got experience delivering these types of services. And it may be slightly different from the big guys out there.
And we don't do overlay, but so find a service provider for the overlay that is going to be, interested in and committed and in finding you the best solution for your needs, rather than maybe what they've got on their books.
Yeah, being led by the business requirements rather than the product.
Correct.
Well, we're out of time. I'd like to thank everybody. I hope we've been vaguely interesting, and Mike's shoes weren't the most interesting part of the of the panel discussion. Thank you.